Welcome to Riverbend, sweetheart.
You just made the biggest mistake of your life.
The cafeteria at Riverbend Federal Correctional held 200 people on a Tuesday morning in February. And at 7:43 a.m., every single one of them went silent at exactly the same second. It started the way it always started, with Marcus Webb. Slowly, deliberately, with the kind of performance that reminded every person in that room exactly who held the power inside these walls. He rose from the center table, all 6'3" of him, and his crew stood with him without being told, because that was how it worked with Marcus. You did not wait for instructions. You moved when he moved, or you answered for the delay later. The woman he walked toward did not look up. She was seated at the far end of a steel table near the east wall, tray in front of her, eyes down, hands folded, with a stillness that had nothing to do with peace and everything to do with patience. She had been eating breakfast at that same table, in that same seat, at that same time, for 11 weeks. She did not speak to other inmates. She did not make eye contact with the guards. She existed at Riverbend the way a shadow exists, present, silent, and entirely easy to ignore. Marcus stopped behind her, reached over her shoulder, picked up her tray, and poured it directly over her head. Cold coffee, canned beans, congealed rice from the morning batch. The metal tray hit the table afterward with a sound that rang through the silence like a gunshot. His crew erupted in laughter. Nearby inmates looked away. No one moved. No one spoke. She sat with food running down her face, and her hands still flat on the table, and her breathing perfectly controlled. And then, slowly, with the unhurried calm of someone who had already made a decision, she turned her head and looked directly at Marcus Webb. Not with fear, not with anger, with the quiet, measuring attention of someone taking inventory. Marcus smiled down at her. "Welcome to Riverbend, sweetheart." She said nothing, but her eyes did not leave his face. If you've ever watched someone absorb something that should have broken them and stay completely still, then you already know what the inmates closest to that table felt in their chests in that moment. Something that wasn't quite fear and wasn't quite awe. Something in between. If that feeling is already pulling at you, hit subscribe and stay with me. Because what this quiet woman does next will make you question everything you thought you knew about silence. What Marcus Webb could not have known, what no one sitting in that cafeteria could have imagined, was that the woman he had just humiliated in front of 200 witnesses had spent 7 years working for a classified government program that officially did not exist. That she had been trained by people whose names never appeared on any document. That she had once neutralized 4 armed men in a corridor in under 9 seconds. And that she had been sitting quietly at that same table, at that same time, every single morning for 11 weeks. Not because she was afraid of Marcus Webb, but because she had been waiting to see exactly how far he would go. He had just answered that question. Zara Cole had not always been quiet. There was a time, not long ago, by the calendar, though it felt like another lifetime from inside a federal correctional facility, when her apartment in Atlanta smelled like coconut oil and crayons and the particular warmth of a home that belonged to someone who fought hard to build it. There were drawings taped to the refrigerator, 43 of them at last count. Suns with too many rays, houses with smoke coming from chimneys even though the apartment had no fireplace, and in the corner of almost every single one, a small figure with curly hair holding the hand of a taller figure, always together, always touching, as if the 9-year-old who drew them understood instinctively that proximity was its own form of safety. Her daughter's name was Imani, and every night at exactly 7 o'clock, she called. Not sometimes, not most nights, every night. Imani described her school day in strict chronological order, starting with what she had for breakfast and ending with what she watched before bed, never skipping anything, never summarizing, as if each detail deserved its own moment of acknowledgement. Zara would sit at the kitchen table, after a full day at the civil rights law firm where she worked as a paralegal, still in her work clothes, and listened to every word. She could tell which teacher had been unkind that week by the careful neutrality in her daughter's voice when she mentioned that name. She could tell when Imani was tired but refusing to admit it by the way her sentences got shorter near the end. She knew her daughter's voice the way a musician knows an instrument. Every register, every silence, everything that the notes were not saying. That was her life. That was what she had built after 7 years of doing work she could never describe to anyone. Then came the morning 3 federal agents knocked on her door at 3 a.m. with a warrant and a fabricated cocaine distribution charge, assembled by someone from her buried past who needed her disappeared without the inconvenience of killing her. She had 9 seconds before the cuffs went on. She used them to find Imani's eyes across the hallway and say the same 4 words she had said to her daughter every single night since the girl was born. I will always come back. 14 months later, 4 left. But the morning after Marcus Webb poured cold coffee over her head in front of 200 witnesses, Zara Cole woke before dawn, sat on the edge of her bunk in the dark, and began calculating something she had not calculated in 4 years. The exact number of moves required to end a threat permanently without losing the 4 months standing between her and that kitchen table. Riverbend Federal Correctional had been designed as a model facility. Mixed population minimum security, rehabilitation-focused programming, a warden named Greaves who gave keynote speeches at criminal justice conferences about the transformative power of structured environment and dignified incarceration. On paper, Riverbend represented everything the modern prison reform movement wanted to believe was possible. Behind the walls, Marcus Webb had spent 4 years turning it into something that more closely resembled a medieval court, with himself as the only authority that carried any real consequence. His operation was not complicated. It did not need to be. He controlled the commissary supply line, which meant he controlled comfort, the small daily mercies that separated bearable time from unbearable time. He determined who received protection from other inmates and who became a circulating target. 3 of the 6 guards on the day shift received weekly arrangements, not cash, which left traces, but manufactured compliance that made their shifts quieter and their records spotless. Nobody filed reports about what they did not officially observe. The warden did not want to know what he did not have to document. And Marcus had learned, with the patience of someone who had nowhere else to be, that institutional blindness was the most reliable weapon available to a man serving a long sentence. His particular method with female inmates had nothing to do with attraction. It was architectural. Humiliating a woman in front of male inmates multiplied the psychological impact across the entire population simultaneously. It reminded every man watching that Marcus's reach had no boundary, no category, no limitation. If he could do that to her in front of everyone without consequence, then the question of what he might do to any of them answered itself. For 10 days before the cafeteria incident, Marcus had been studying Zara. Her composure unsettled him in a way he could not name but could not ignore. In his experience, quiet people were either terrified and concealing it, or protected by someone powerful enough to make aggression inadvisable. He had spent those 10 days determining which category she occupied. She had no allies, no affiliation, no protector. By his logic, that made her composure not a warning, but an insult that had been accumulating interest long enough. What Marcus did not know was that Zara had been studying him first. She knew his crew's positions at every meal. She knew which guards looked away and at what time. She knew the blind corridor, the camera gap, the 9-minute window every morning when Riverbend's East Wing belonged to no one. She had not gathered this information because she planned to use it. She had gathered it because knowing it meant she could never be caught somewhere she could not survive. At the moment the audience realizes Zara has been the predator watching the predator all along. This is the subscribe peak of the setup. If you can already feel where this is going and you're not subscribed yet, do it right now. Because what Marcus does next doesn't just cross a line. It destroys the only reason Zara Cole had left for staying quiet. 3 days after the cafeteria humiliation, Marcus Webb stopped targeting Zara Cole entirely. He did something far worse. He found out about Imani. And the moment he did, everything Zara had spent 11 weeks building, every careful boundary, every measured silence, every calculated act of invisible survival, began to come apart at the seams. Marcus Webb did not threaten Imani directly. He was far too intelligent for that. What he did was worse. On Thursday morning during the visiting hour, a guard named Rollins, one of the 3 on Marcus's informal arrangement, approached the table where Zara was meeting with her court-appointed attorney. He set a folded piece of paper between them without a word and walked away. Zara's attorney watched it land and said nothing. Zara picked it up and read it. It was a school schedule, Imani's school, printed from a public website that anyone with internet access could find in under 4 minutes. Tuesday and Thursday, late dismissal at 4:15 from the east entrance. Wednesday, early release. After-school program in room 114, running until 5:30. A bus number, a stop location, no message, no name, no threat written anywhere on the page, just information, delivered at a specific moment, by a specific hand, for one specific purpose, to demonstrate reach, to say in the quietest possible language, I know where she is, and I can find her any time I choose. Zara folded the paper once, placed it in her pocket, looked up at her attorney, and continued the meeting. Her attorney later told a colleague she had never witnessed anything like it. Not a tremor in the hands, not a shift in the eyes. Like watching someone receive a piece of information with the physical weight of a grenade and simply absorb it into their body without expression. What her attorney could not see was what was happening underneath that stillness. The war between the mother and the operative had been running as a low current since the morning of the cafeteria incident. The mother wanted to call Imani's grandmother immediately, wanted to arrange emergency placement, alert the school, contact someone outside with the authority to create a physical barrier between her daughter and whatever Rollins represented. The operative understood that reacting, visibly, measurably, in any way Marcus could observe or report back on, handed him a weapon more powerful than any physical threat. Imani's safety right now depended entirely on Marcus not knowing that the paper had landed. That night, alone in her cell after lights out, Zara did the thing her trainer had taught her to do in the worst moments of her previous life. She lay completely still. She let the fear move through her body without fighting it. She felt it in her hands, in her chest, in the back of her jaw, where tension always collected first. She named it out loud in a whisper, because unnamed fear controls you, but named fear is only information. She was afraid. She loved her daughter. She had 4 months left. She could not afford to act. That was Thursday night. Friday morning, Marcus stood in the breakfast line loud enough for 14 inmates to hear and described Imani by name, her age, the color of her backpack, the number of the bus she rode home on Wednesdays. He described her the way someone describes an object they have already decided belongs to them. Darius, 19 years old, and 3 places behind Zara in the line, watched her face in that moment and felt the temperature of the room drop by 10 degrees. Not because of what he saw, because of what he didn't see. No fear, no rage, no reaction at all. Just a decision settling into place behind her eyes, like a key turning in a lock. Zara set her tray down at 7:43 a.m. and sat at her usual table for the last time. Because in the 8 minutes that followed, The woman who had spent 11 weeks being invisible made a choice that could not be unmade. And Marcus Webb spent those same 8 minutes eating his breakfast without the slightest understanding that they were the last 8 minutes he would ever spend believing he was the most dangerous person inside Riverbend Federal Correctional Facility. That was the first thing that confused everyone who watched what happened next. Because in Riverbend, when someone reached their limit, they moved toward the threat, loud, fast, emotional, and usually already losing before the first contact was made. Zara stood up from her table, walked calmly to the guard station near the east wall, and filed a formal verbal complaint. She named Rollins. She named the paper. She described the school schedule in precise detail, including the bus number and the stop location, in a flat, unhurried voice that suggested she was reporting a broken vending machine rather than a threat against her 9-year-old daughter. The duty officer on the station, not Rollins, documented it automatically because it was procedure, and because something in the way she spoke made him feel that not documenting it would be a mistake he would answer for later. Then she walked back through the cafeteria, all the way to the center table, and sat down directly across from Marcus Webb without being invited. The room went silent in the same way it had gone silent 11 days earlier, instantly, completely, like someone had pulled a plug. Marcus looked up from his tray with the particular expression of a man who had never once been surprised inside these walls, and was now, for the first time, encountering something his instincts had no existing file for. She looked at him the way a surgeon looks at a procedure they have already completed in their mind. She spoke quietly. 3 sentences. She told him what she was, she told him what he had done, and she told him what was going to happen next. Not as a threat, but as a statement of sequence, the way a professional describes an outcome that has already been determined and simply has not occurred yet. Marcus stood up. His 4-man crew stood with him. What followed lasted 40 seconds. The script will carry every detail of those 40 seconds, but what the inmates watching from across the room would describe to investigators afterward was not the movement itself. It was the quality of it, the absence of anger, the complete lack of urgency. Each response landed before the threat that triggered it had fully formed, as if Zara were not reacting to what Marcus and his crew were doing, but to what they were about to do, a half-second ahead of every decision they made, every adjustment, every escalation, as if she had already run the entire sequence in her mind and was simply walking through it now for the first time physically. Marcus went down last. He was the largest. He fell the fastest. Darius, watching from 15 feet away, later told the investigating officer that the strangest detail was her breathing. Through all 40 seconds of it, through 4 men and every weapon they carried. Like she just took a walk, he said, like it cost her nothing. This is the moment, right here. If this story is hitting you the way I think it is, subscribe right now and turn on notifications, because the truth about why Zara Cole was really inside Riverbend is coming in the next 60 seconds, and it will change everything. But when the guards pulled the federal database that afternoon and ran Marcus Webb's full record against the sealed government file that required deputy director clearance to access, a file attached to Zara Cole's name that nobody at Riverbend had known existed, what they found inside it had nothing to do with a drug charge. And it explained, with terrifying clarity, exactly why a woman with Zara's particular history had ended up in a minimum security facility on a fabricated cocaine distribution charge in the first place. Zara was placed in administrative segregation within the hour. She did not resist. She did not argue. She made one request, quietly, to the duty officer processing her paperwork, that someone confirm Imani's school had been contacted and that the child was with her grandmother before the end of the business day. The officer, still visibly shaken by what the cafeteria cameras had recorded, made the call personally. He did not explain why. He simply made it. 48 hours later, an FBI field supervisor named Castillo arrived at Riverbend without a scheduled appointment and met privately with Warden Greaves for 2 hours and 17 minutes. What came out of that meeting was not a use of force review. It was not a disciplinary proceeding against Zara. It was the beginning of an internal investigation into the fabricated evidence, the paid informant, and the name of the individual inside the dismantled government program who had arranged Zara Cole's incarceration 14 months earlier. Marcus Webb had no connection to any of it. He had simply made the catastrophic mistake of selecting a target whose life was already orbiting forces large enough to make him irrelevant by comparison. He was transferred to a maximum security facility 3 days after the incident. His commissary arrangements collapsed within a week. The 3 guards on his informal payroll were placed on administrative leave pending investigation. And for the first time in 4 years, Riverbend's cafeteria in the morning sounded like a room full of people rather than a territory being quietly managed. Darius wrote his mother a letter that week. He did not explain everything that had happened. He told her only that he had watched something he could not describe, and that it had made him want to be different when he got out. She wrote back and told him that was enough. But what nobody at Riverbend understood, not Castillo, not Greaves, not the duty officer who made the call about Imani, was that Zara Cole already knew the investigation would find exactly what it was looking for, because she had spent 14 months inside these walls, not just surviving Marcus Webb. She had been building a case, and the person who put her here was still outside, still free, still completely certain they had neutralized her. They were about to discover exactly how wrong they were. Zara Cole walked out of Riverbend Federal Correctional Facility on a Wednesday morning in June. No press statement, no interview, no moment performed for anyone watching. She came through the front gate in the same gray sweater and dark jeans she had been arrested in 14 months earlier, carrying a small bag and a legal folder that represented the first page of something she intended to finish on her own terms and in her own time. Imani was standing outside the gate with her grandmother. She had grown 3 inches. She was wearing a green jacket Zara had never seen, and she was holding a hand-drawn card, construction paper, crayon, uneven letters that pressed too hard on some words and too soft on others, that said across the front, in the careful handwriting of a child who had been practicing, "I knew you'd come back," because her mother had told her, and Imani had believed her, because that is what 9 years of kept promises builds in a child. Not blind faith, but earned certainty. Zara held her daughter for a long time, long enough that her grandmother looked away, because some reunions are not meant to be witnessed. They are meant only to be lived. What happened to Marcus Webb, what the sealed file eventually confirmed, what Zara did with the name she had been carrying for 14 months, those are stories that belong to their own time. What matters is this. Some people stay quiet, not because they have nothing to say, but because they are waiting until what they say cannot be ignored. Zara Cole is home. If this story moved you, subscribe. Leave a comment below telling me who you think put Zara inside Riverbend. And share this with someone who needs to hear it today.